All right. Hi, everybody. I hope that everybody is doing well, and I'm really excited to be here with Alex. I'm Sophie, and we're going to be taking you through through a lesson on data manipulation with pandas today. But before we get started, I'm just going to kind of walk through the context of where we're at in this whole series. And so feel free, as we're getting started, to just say hello on the chat, introduce yourself, let us know that everything is copacetic, because this is my first time live streaming directly. So in case there are any issues, I want to know.
Yeah, I know right now we're streaming on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and I think also Twitch, although not very many people know about the existence of our Twitch channel. But Sophie and I will predominantly be looking at the YouTube chat. So if you're watching on any of those other platforms, you could come find us on YouTube and chat with us. And then, yeah, if you're watching the recorded version of this, we have been doing these live streams every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're catching the recording version, we would love to see you during a live version.
Yeah. So if you want to learn more about the events that are going on, you can always come to the codecademy.com/events page. And this is our event today. And this is our event on Thursday, when we're going to have a pro event where you can come and ask questions, more of like an open office hours event. And today we are continuing our visualization or visualize data with Python path. And so last week, Zoe and Jamie went through some of this earlier content. I think where were they last week?
Yeah, so I think they did the kind of second series of matplotlib lessons, which matplotlib is the kind of standard Python graphing library. And I think, yeah, so Jamie and Zoe did a lesson on matplotlib, and then I think on the Thursday session for pro members, they dove into the kind of cumulative project we have there.
Right. So today we're going to be going through this lesson on data manipulation with pandas, creating, loading, and selecting data with pandas. So if you want to follow along, I think the link is on YouTube, but you can also find it on Codecademy directly. And just to give a little context on why we're kind of breaking from our content on matplotlib and actual graphing and now getting into this kind of data manipulation section, is that in the real world, a lot of the time you'll have data that you're collecting either in a Google sheet or a Excel file, and then you want to be able to import that data into Python so that you can actually create visualizations of that. And so the content that we've gone through so far has been really focused on using some built-in data structures like lists to build these visuals. But now we're going to kind of talk about the step that precedes that, where you need to actually be able to load your data in and get it in a form where you can then use those plotting libraries to actually make the visualizations of the data that you have. Do you have anything to add there, Alex?
No, I think we should get into it. Like you said, like before, all the visualization stuff that we've done so far, it's like kind of been demo examples of like, oh, we created a list of like 5 numbers and let's draw 5 bars in a bar chart to represent those numbers. And so we haven't really been able to work with like real data in a meaningful way yet. And so this lesson is kind of like the intro to that, of like, okay, I have this giant spreadsheet of data. How do I even get that into Python so I can eventually turn it into a graph? And so that's what this lesson is talking about, of using pandas, which is the thing that lets you get all of this data into Python.
Yeah. All right. So to get started, we're going to have to load the pandas library into our workspace. And that's really the purpose of this initial exercise here. We talked about this a little bit the last time we were on, but Alex, do you want to talk for a second about why we're importing pandas as PD?
Yeah, so in Python and most programming languages, whenever you import a library or a module into the code that you're working with, you'll often have to like reference that library whenever you use any of its functionality. So for example, the pandas library, we're going to be using, I think the function, yeah, we can even see over in the right-hand side, we're going to be using read CSV, that function a lot of times. And so in order to use that, we need to say what library is it going to come from, and it comes from the pandas library. So every time we could type, pandas.read CSV, basically meaning use the read CSV function from the pandas library. But because we're going to have to do that again and again and again, it's like typical to abbreviate it as PD, or you'll see other libraries do this.
I think the last time we were loading NumPy as NP.
Yeah, and matplotlib, we usually end up loading it as like PLT. And so it's just kind of a nice little trick that you can do to avoid having to type out the same long library name every single time.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we'll just take a look at this first page for a second, because I think it's just helpful to see this visual of some data really quickly to get a sense of what Pandas is going to allow us to do. And so if you've been following the series, you've seen lists, you might have also seen dictionaries in Python, but Pandas is really what's going to enable us to load data in a tabular form. And this might look really similar to what you have seen if you've ever opened an Excel file or a Google Doc or a Google Sheet. You'll often see data that's stored in this way. And you can see that we have, this example has some rows, each one references a person, and it has some different columns with information. It looks like maybe these are sales. So people who made a sale or made a purchase of shoes, and that's being collected in this data frame. And so we're going to walk through these steps in a moment, but you can see that Pandas allows us to read in this data that's in this new format that we haven't necessarily been able to create with the existing structures we've gone through.
Yeah, and furthermore, it's like you could do all of this stuff using just kind of base Python, right? You could have like a list of lists that could create this two-dimensional spreadsheet like formula, but it kind of becomes a huge pain in the butt to like learn how to like navigate that. And so one of the strengths of Pandas that you'll see is that we can like very easily access stuff by column name. So we might be able to say like, okay, get me just the email column. And that would be way harder to do if we were just using lists, for example.
Yeah, I actually think in one of the future exercises, you're going to see how we can take a list of lists, or we can take a dictionary and turn that into a data frame for just that reason. There's also some other things that make it really cool, and I'll try to demo those as we go.
Yeah, we have a good question in the chat from Quartz3. I don't know how to exactly say that, but yeah, so you can import pandas as P, and yeah, you can totally do that. The thing that comes after as, you can kind of think of it as like you're defining a variable name for the library where you can make it whatever you want. So you could do P, you could do PD, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. All right, Alex, we've got a slight issue.
Let's see.
Does not seem to be loading.
Let's just give it a refresh, see what happens.
Yeah. Whoop, there we go. Okay. When in doubt, refresh. Got it. Okay, so this first exercise is just kind of walking us through a very basic data frame that we can create with just, I think this is a dictionary, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so if you look at this example code, we've kind of walked you through creating this very simple data frame. It's got 3 columns: name, address, and age. And this structure, so if you just look at this piece that's inside kind of the parentheses, and same thing here, if you look at this piece inside the parentheses, this is a Python dictionary, but we're going to now use a pandas function to turn it into this new structure, which we're calling a data frame. So we can walk through. I think this exercise is just asking us to add some more data to this data frame.
Yeah,
so let's see.
This first one is saying, okay, I can define my columns. I can give columns the key name in the dictionary, and then the value will be a list of the things that will go in that column. These first couple of exercises in this lesson are going to be showing basically how to just create the data frames to begin with. And then the rest are showing, okay, what can we do now that the data frame exists? And I think that this is probably one of the more unusual ways to create a data frame. I think probably the most typical one is just loading from a CSV file, which is a file that you might be familiar with if you've worked in Excel or spreadsheets. Most of the times when I use pandas, I'm just loading from a CSV file. I don't really do this work of like putting all of my data in by hand and then turning it into a data frame. But it's good to know that you have the option to do so.
Yeah, I think a lot of times one of the things, and I should preface this by telling you all that my preferred or my expert language is R, and I'm still honestly learning Python. So this is a learning experience for all of us. But I think one of the things that can happen a lot is sometimes the functions that you want to use can only take certain types of objects. So knowing what object type you have and then what you can turn that into in order to get different types of functions from different libraries to work is kind of a useful thing. It's always helpful to know what you have and what you can turn it into. Yeah. Okay, so I think I got this.
So we added two more columns here where we added a product name column and a color column. Little details in here where it's like we're creating a dictionary. So you'll notice that there's a comma after the list of product IDs, there's a comma and then a comma after the list of product names. So kind of this is the way that you create a dictionary in Python, is that you have the key, which is a string, and then a colon, and then the value, which is a list in this case. And then that pattern repeated between commas for every item in your dictionary.
Exactly. And then you can see I've printed this data frame that I created. And so we've got our three columns: color, product ID, and product name. And then you can also see, I didn't actually put this in anywhere, but you can see that it's automatically kind of labeled our rows with indices, so from 0 to 3. And that's something that I'll talk about a little bit later too, or we'll talk about once we get into some of the indexing stuff in the future exercises. But I think it's kind of interesting to notice that something is existing here and we didn't even put that in.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Another good question in the YouTube chat from John David Roca. He asks, so we mentioned that the naming conventions of using pandas as PD is pretty standard, and he's wondering how universal is this? I would say it's pretty universal, John. If you look at like the pandas documentation, you'll see that all over the documentation, they do the exact same thing where they import it as PD.
Yeah, I have taken numerous online classes in pandas and NumPy, and all of them have the same convention. So I haven't actually seen it not abbreviated as PD, I think.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So this next exercise is also creating a data frame. So you'll notice we're actually using the exact same function as we were using in the previous exercise. So I'll go back for a second so you can see that. This pd.dataframe or pd.dataframe function is going to do different things. I don't know why my computer is a little slow. So this same function can take different inputs depending on what you want to turn into a data frame. So it can kind of figure out what you want based on what you put in. Okay, so here we've got a list of lists that we're going to turn into a data frame. And so we've got, again, now we've got in each of these lists, actually, the columns are kind of, you can almost see them by looking vertically. So in each row of or each list that we're including in here, we're actually including multiple columns of data. So this is really our first row of our data frame, second row, third row, etc. And then we've got our column names are another input to this function.
Yeah, the syntax is a little bit tricky there, where it's like a list of lists and then a comma and then another list. So the syntax is a little bit tricky there. I think one thing that to highlight here, which is another question that John Rocca said in the chat, where he was asking in the last exercise, the column or the color column ended up as the first column in the data frame, even though in our dictionary it maybe wasn't the first. And so basically his question is like, why did that happen? And I think that you'll see using this method, I believe the columns are going to show up in the order in which we put them in the columns list here. So if the columns are that go into this list are going to be whatever these are, store location or store ID, location, and number of employees, I think we can kind of force them to be in that order. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. You're never really going to be using these data frames in a way where you're saying, I want the second column. You're almost always going to be just saying, I want the color column. So you can do things to force the column order, but for the most part, that's kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, that was a good catch. Let's see if this works. There we go. And it is in store ID, number of employee or location, and then number of employees. So that's the same order as here. That's interesting. I wonder if it did it alphabetically for the last one.
If we go back and look at it, hopefully it loads up. But yeah, good question, John. Kurt says, because dictionaries don't care about the order, so it makes sense that the dictionaries are sorted in alphabetical order, right? Dictionaries don't really have a sense of ordering, right, in the way that lists do, where a list knows what's first, second, third. Dictionaries don't really have that structure built into them. So you're exactly right, Courts. It makes sense for them to just kind of default to alphabetical.
That's really, that's good to know. And again, this is like a good reason to always print your data or take a look at your data. And I think in a future exercise, we'll see how you can, if you have a large data set, you can look at a few columns at a time. But if you wanted to index the columns based on their index, or if you wanted to pull out a column based on its index, then you'd have to know what order they're in. So that would be a useful thing to at least be aware of. And I didn't notice that the first time I did that. So that's great. You learn something new.
Sophie, before we move on, actually, I want to try something. And this is perhaps a tangent, but I think one of the reasons why I like doing these like live shows is because it kind of like shows you, if I were taking a Codecademy course, the kind of stuff that I would be doing. And like, I really want to encourage people to play around with these workspaces even after they, pass our checks. And so something that I would be interested in is, let's say that first list of San Diego, what if we add a fourth item to the list? Let's just say like 300, right? And so now we have one row with 4 columns, right? We have 1 San Diego, 100, 300. And then all the other rows only have 3 columns. And I frankly have no idea what's going to happen. Maybe they'll insert nulls. Maybe this row won't exist. Let's see what happens if we try this.
Okay. Interesting. So it just ignored it looks like.
Ignored it. What if we put a fourth thing in the column? Yeah. So if we give a fourth column name, obviously the 300 should show up. And then,
very nice.
Sophie, you want to explain what those NaNs are? Yeah,
so NaN stands for not a number. And so basically this is missing data. Actually, I'm curious. So I work in R, where missing data is identified by like an NA, and then usually not a number comes up when, let's say you've got 2 columns and you want to calculate a proportion or something. So you divide one by the other, and that creates division by 0 in some place, which you can't do. And so usually not a number shows up in R when you've got like a
numerical error.
A numerical error. Is NaN just like all missing data in Python?
So no, I don't think so. But again, this is something that I would, so I don't really know the answer to this. And so to figure out the answer, I would probably experiment with it. And I'm guessing that because we put 300 as that value that exists, it's like forcing this column to deal with numbers. If we change that to a string, I bet we get something other than NaN. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. So fun playing with this with you. Okay. Shall we move on?
Yeah. So that's, again, that's a good example of one, feel free to like play around with these workspaces. It's a really great way to learn what you're dealing with. And then two, like, don't be afraid if you don't understand something, right? It's like more important to know how to deal with it. So it's like, oh, these like NaNs popped up and you don't really know why, but it's good that you at least know that they're represented as NaNs rather than nuns. So it's just like the more you experiment, the more opportunities you have to like understand what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, after this, I probably will go and look up all the different forms of missing data in Python to understand them, because it's also an important thing to be able to understand. Like, I would also want to know at some point whether this none, if that's being read by Python as a string, or if like Python is, or if we're able to recognize that that's really like missing information.
Yeah. We have some, so we can go on to the next one, Sophie, but as we go on to the next one, we have some good questions from Siddharth. I hope I'm saying that correctly. How do we force convert NaN values in a data frame to a float or an integer, like some columns all at once? I believe we have some exercises later on in Codecademy that deal with this concept of like kind of tidying up your data of you have a data frame and you have like empty values or you have null values. And so there are definitely some functions that you can use to say, okay, automatically replace all nans with zeros, or I'll replace all nuns with the empty string or something like that. Obviously, there are like consequences for doing that, where now you have zeros everywhere and your averages might be all screwed up. But like there are ways to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a whole separate course on what to do with missing data, but there's definitely functionality. I do not know it off the top of my head.
Yeah, neither do I.
Okay, so I'm actually going to skip this exercise. Well, okay, we'll do it.
Well, let's talk about the
let's talk about the content.
And actually, Sophie, I don't mind. So there's an annoying bug in this exercise, and I don't mind if you like talk about it and why it's an annoying bug on Codecademy right now.
Okay, sure. I was bothering Alex about this yesterday. In prepping for this, I went through this exercise. So first, let me give you the context. So this is an exercise about comma-separated values, or CSV files. And basically, most spreadsheets could be converted to a CSV file. It's one of the most common data formats that I've seen. So if you have like an Excel or a Google Sheet, you can save it as a CSV file and then read it into your workspace in Python using pandas. So this exercise is really just showing you what a CSV file looks like. And basically, you can imagine that this is a data frame we want to create. And so if we're going to save this information in a CSV file, then we need to save it basically in a file that ends in .csv. And the contents of it is going to be, each row will be its own line, and all the values in that row will be separated by commas, comma-separated values. And so this exercise is asking you to create a CSV file that would have all of this data in it. And so what I did, because I was feeling a little bit lazy and I didn't want to type this all out, is I copied, I think you guys saw me do that, but I'll just do it again. So I copied this, copied that, all the contents of that table, and pasted it in to the CSV file. And then I went back through and I deleted all the spaces and replaced them with commas. And then, and I'll do that really fast.
And I guess as Sophie is doing that, I'll say and watch out, I think birthday cake is one entry.
Oh, yeah.
I'll say, so this exercise is showing what a CSV is. And then I believe the next exercise is saying like, okay, let's assume you have your CSV file, it's ready to go. Let's show how we load that into Python using pandas and create a data frame out of it. So this exercise is really just kind of trying to show what a CSV is. And as Sophie will show here, this is a kind of annoying bug because I imagine that many people will just copy and paste that data in.
Okay, so it's spelling this. And it turns out that the reason is in this, whatever this font is, this is like a curly apostrophe, and it's not getting recognized here. We want this like straight apostrophe. And so if I delete that and replace it now.
So this is like really not important. This is just like a nice little like how Codecademy works for those of you watching this stream, where for our backend test that is testing to see if you've done this correctly is we're checking to see if your text literally matches the text that we want it to match. And we are using one type of apostrophe that's not like this curly apostrophe in the test. But if you copy over all of the information from the left pane over here, it has the wrong kind of apostrophe. It's a very easy thing to fix. I think after this lesson, Sophie and I will like go fix it. But you know, those of you that use Codecademy, I'm sure you've run into buggy tests before, and Sophie and I found one, and we'll hopefully go and fix it soon.
We'll fix it. Okay, so now we get to some of the fun stuff.
Yes,
this is where those first exercises, just gotta get our framework together, and now we can actually load in some data.
Court says it's an important message. The devil's in the details, and yeah, you're exactly right. Like this different kind of apostrophe was really screwing it up.
So funny. Yeah, it's funny. I definitely, you know, as I'm going through these exercises, I'm having, I think, the same experience that a lot of our learners feel when, you know, you get somewhere and then it doesn't pass the test and you just really want that green check mark as the self-validation that you know what you're doing. And so when you find silly little things like that, it can be frustrating, but
it's good to like, one of the benefits of doing these courses is that we get to really like user test them. Even you know, this course came out probably over a year and a half ago, and so it's good to get kind of fresh eyes on it.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so now we're going to get into some functions to read CSV files into your workspace and also to write CSV files. And so that means if you have a data frame that's already created, or you've worked on that data frame in some way, you've modified the data, created new columns, you can always create a CSV file again on your computer. So Alex, do you want to maybe talk about like why that's so powerful that you can both read and write CSV files?
Yeah, sure. Did you ask me to talk about it?
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So so reading CSV files is really important because a lot of times that's where your data sources will come from. If you look for, you know, data online, I would say the majority of the time, or at least the format that I'm most comfortable with dealing with, is data that comes in a CSV file. So that's the importance of reading it, is that's kind of the format, or one of the formats that real data exists in a lot of times. And then, being able to write to a CSV file is really powerful because we'll be able to do something in Python and do something like fairly complicated, right? Let's say you're, I don't even have a good example, but let's say you do something fairly complicated in Python and you end up with this data that you want to show somebody else. But not everybody knows how to use Python. Not everybody could take your Python script and know how to run it and know how to interpret the results and all that sort of stuff. And so it's really powerful to be able to then write to a CSV file that you can then give to someone, and they could open it up in Excel. And if they're trained to use Excel properly, they'll be able to do whatever they need to do with it. So writing a CSV file is really important for basically just sharing your work.
Yeah. A lot of times when you're working, maybe you're working with pandas, you're trying to clean some data. And so you've got this really messy data set that you have to fix the missing data. You have to create some new columns, maybe delete some columns, delete some rows. And so you're making all these edits. And sometimes also you just don't want to have all that code in the same place where you're making, let's say, your visualizations or something else. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have a script that does all the cleaning and all the data modification, and then I'll read in the data, I'll modify it, write it again, and then I'll read that new data set into a new script that actually does like the data visualization piece. And I think that can also help make your files a little bit cleaner and have clear purposes for everything, every set of code that you write. Which I think is
I do this for my job all the time, where again, I'm a curriculum developer, so I'm one of the people that are making these lessons. And so usually I develop my lessons on my own computer using something like Python, and I kind of need to like then take the output of that, like I'll make a CSV file that I then need to like move into Codecademy. And so I will, have my local Python script on my computer, export the CSV file from Python to my computer, and then upload that CSV file to Codecademy.
Okay, so I have, while Alex was talking, written a line of code. So this is just using the pd.read_CSV function. So the read_CSV function from pandas. I'm giving it the name of my file. And so Codecademy under the hood just has already given you this CSV file in your workspace. I think it's here, yeah. So sample.csv exists in your file structure, and so pandas can read it in. And I think if you're working on your own computer, we have some off-platform projects that will show you how to get it set up so that you can read a file in from a different location. I wonder if Alex froze. Can anyone in the chat just let me know that you can still hear me, since I do not see Alex? I'm going to keep talking for now, but hopefully somebody can let me know that we are still online. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at this. Still haven't seen anyone. Okay. I'm going to keep going, but let me know. Okay. Yes, you can see me. Great. Thank you. All right. Perfect. Thanks. Okay. So we're going to take a look at this data frame that we just loaded. So this looks just like what we saw in the other exercises, but now we've been able to load the CSV file from our workspace into Python, and we've called it DF, short for data frame. I think a lot of times when you're just working with a random data set and you want to save it as something quickly, people try to pick like a short name that they can use really, really quickly, and DF is probably the most common one that people kind of come up with. You're back.
Sorry everyone.
Like, no, you're good. I was like, did I have internet or did you? But it seems like, oh yeah. John David says, sorry, the slow chat makes it tough to respond sometimes. Yeah, thank you guys. You guys are the best.
Sorry everyone, I just moved locations, and this is the first time testing out one of these streams on the new building that I'm in. So internet might be a tad touchy.
No worries. So I was just saying, we saved this as something called DF, and then we were able to print it in our workspace, and it looks pretty similar to what we saw before. We noticed that same thing is happening here, where we've got the numbers 0 through 4 kind of automatically listed here, and I can pretty much guarantee you those are not in the actual CSV file. I wonder if we can kind of see. Oh yeah, so you can check. So those numbers were not in that CSV file, but just like when we were creating our data frame from a list of lists or a dictionary, we're still getting these indices. And so we can come back to that when we get a little bit further along, but I think it's, again, useful to know that those are there.
Cool.
Okay.
Nice.
All right, let us go to the next one. Okay, so this is like this lesson's title, Inspect a Data Frame, really is probably the most important thing that you need to know how to do in order to do data science. Like looking at your data and inspecting it to understand what's going on is by far the most important step before you do any sort of visualization or anything else, like any sort of cleaning. That's what you need to do to get started.
Yeah, I agree. In most of our curriculum, this is like kind of the first step that we'll always have you do in a new lesson of like, let's just get familiar with the data that we're working with.
Guys, my mom is watching this and she just texted me, I can still see you.
Thanks for summer.
Okay, so let's take a look. So we've got a couple of functions that are going to help us take a look at this data set. So I think I mentioned this when we first started. This dot head, would you call this a method or a function?
This is a good question. I probably, against my better judgment, use those terms pretty interchangeably. Technically, a method is like belongs to a certain class. And so I bet you could make the argument that that head belongs to the class of DataFrame, meaning you can like call the head method on DataFrames. So yeah, I think method works, but I know in Codecademy, at least, we might use those somewhat interchangeably when they have strict definitions. But okay. So for me, that's kind of something that I shrug my shoulders on, where it's important to understand like the concept of these things, and like the precise language is like not super important.
Okay.
Especially.
Yeah. So I think one of the hardest steps for me and kind of getting used to doing some of the data analysis stuff that we're doing now in Python is that coming from an R background, I was not really used to this idea of like objects and methods and things like that. So that is a little bit new for me.
I was basically the reverse, where I learned programming in Python, so I'm super familiar with Python. And then I recently wrote R courses for Codecademy, and it was my first time using R. And yeah, it's definitely very different.
Yeah. Okay, so we're trying to do this. The other thing that surprises me sometimes about, or that confuses me, I think, a little bit about methods, and maybe you can clarify this, maybe other people have the same question, is that sometimes when you use a method, it like changes the object directly. And then sometimes you have to like resave the object in order to keep that change.
Yeah, we'll see that come up, and it really happens. There's no strict, like, it can't always do this or this always happens. It really depends on the method. But yeah, I think you'll see us talking about this of like, it happens in place versus it like returns a value. And I think that this comes up in like adding to an array, where you don't have to do, like, let's say you have an array named A, you don't have to do A equals A dot add, whatever number. You can just do A dot add number, and it does it in place. It automatically overrides what it used to store there. And so there's no strict rule as to like which ones do it in place and which ones don't.
Interesting. Yeah. It's something that like, it's a place where I feel like I commonly make mistakes in Python, where I'm like, why isn't my data frame updated? And then I realize it's because I didn't resave it and I needed to.
Yeah, as Lisa, who I know is in chat, said earlier, just like print is your friend, right? If you're ever curious about like what you're even working with, just print it out.
Yes. Okay, so I have loaded this data frame called imdb.csv into a data frame called df using the read_csv function. And now I guess I'll do that first step. And now let's say that we want to see some of the rows of that data frame, but we're not sure how many rows there are. And so, if there's a million rows, we don't want to try to print those all out at once. So we can use this .head method or function or whatever you would like to call it to see the first a few rows. And so we'll see them over here. And that gave us 5 rows. And then you can always, I think this was in the explanation or in the narrative as well, but you can always change the input to a different number. So if we wanted 10 rows, we could put a 10 there. I think 5 is just the default. So, oh, it's yelling at me because I didn't do the next step. Okay. So now we've got 10 rows. Okay. And then we can also use the info method to get some more info about our data frame. And so I'm going to do that down here. You'll notice, so when we print the first however many rows, it prints over here. Alex, do you want to explain like what's going on here?
Yeah, I was going to do that in a second. Let's do info first, and then we can talk about it. Nice.
Cool. So so down here you can see the output of df.info. And so it's telling us a little bit about the columns. It tells us what each of the columns are, how many values are in there, and how many are not null. I assume that it tells you if there's a null value in there, how many nulls there are.
Interesting. I wish there was an easy way for us to like add a row with a null value. I don't know that syntax off the top of my head. But that's something that we could try to play around with
on Thursday for sure. And then it tells you the type as well.
A couple of questions. There are a couple of things to go over. One is that Lisa in chat is asking about the tail function. So Sophie, as I talk, do you want to like experiment with tail, see if you can give tail a number, see what that does? And then the distinction between these kind of two panels that are showing different things. One is this panel on the right-hand side that is showing our data frames kind of nicely printed out. And then the other is this black panel with white text. So the one on the right is kind of our fancy like Codecademy rendering of the output, where you'll see that at the top of all these files, we import Codecademy lib. Again, this is like kind of behind the scenes stuff that you don't really have to worry about that much, but that is the thing that will take the output and transform it into this like very pretty, table that you can scroll and it's spaced out. Secretly, this is like an HTML file, and it's just an HTML file. But if you're doing this on your own computer, you're not going to have a nice, pretty printout like that. You're just going to have your terminal, which will look something like this. So when you print out a data frame just locally using your terminal, that's the kind of thing that you'll see.
Yeah. And this is part of the reason why I like Jupyter Notebooks so much is that Jupyter Notebooks will do this for you. They will make these things look nice, but also print out your typical like code results.
And terminal results.
Or terminal results. Yeah. So it'll kind of format everything nicely. And as somebody with a little bit of OCD, that is something that I appreciate. Okay.
So what did tail do there as a?
So tail gives you the last 5 rows.
Cool.
Or however many rows you want.
Yeah,
that was a good point.
With someone with, I don't know if it's OCD, but with someone who likes movies, I'm trying to figure out what this list of movies is. It might be highest grossing of all time, but I don't know. Maybe we say somewhere in the narrative.
Interesting. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, and then the other thing that I think we mentioned this in our last live stream, but I think it's not covered so much in this lesson, but I'm just going to show really fast another thing and this is maybe to add on to the point about it's important to know what kind of object you have because it alters the way that you can work with this information. Is that now that we have this in a data frame, each of these columns is going to give us some different behavior than what we saw in lists and dictionaries. So now, for example, if I wanted to like add a number to everything in this column, I guess I shouldn't do this till after we can pull out a column, but I could simultaneously add a number to every value in this column. So all of a sudden these data frames are going to be operating in a different way than our lists and dictionaries were operating.
And again, in a way that's like probably easier. If you caught the last session that Sophie and I ran, we were showing like these really kind of confusing list comprehensions, which are trying to add, 5 to every item in the list, and it looks really ugly. And again, the point of data frames is that it makes it super easy to do. You can essentially just say, get your column and +5, and it does it automatically.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's see what we've got now. So this section is now getting into selecting columns. And I think this is probably, again, a very, very important thing to know how to do. And one of the powers, like Alex mentioned, of pandas, because now we can kind of pull out rows and columns of our data in a much simpler way than we could have with a list or a dictionary. Okay, so let's see. We've got this data frame. I'm going to go ahead and just print it out so we can see. Actually, now it looks like we've got a terminal.
Yeah.
So we can see what this looks like in a terminal.
Yeah.
And
funny, we don't need that import Codecademy lib at the top of this now. That's another little thing that we can go back and fix eventually.
Oh yeah, I like to. I've been working on this on my own and pulling this window really wide so you can see all of this data.
Nice.
But now you can see, yeah, so it's got all the same information. It just doesn't look quite as fancy. All right, so, but it's giving me this thing because it's telling me we didn't do the exercise.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so it's asking me to create a variable called clinic_north that contains only the data from column clinic_north. So basically, we're going to try to pull this column out of our data frame.
So again, this is really the first opportunity that we're really seeing the like power of these data frames, where this is something that would be a real pain in the butt to do in basic Python, but super easy here.
Yeah. So, okay, so we're going to just use this syntax. So the name of the data frame and then the name of the column that we want in quotes. So here we've got clinic_north, and we're going to save that as, what does it want me to save it as? clinic_north, and run. And now it looks good. I think there's a point that gets made earlier in this. It says, or maybe it's in the next one about, oh, it's in the next one. But saying that you can pull out a column using this other syntax as well. So like the name of the data frame dot the column name. Oh, it is here, sorry. And it says if it doesn't contain spaces or special characters, which makes some sense. So one of the things in the spirit of kind of playing with this workspace that we might want to see is what happens if some of our column names have spaces. So I'm going to try that. I'm going to put a space in here and then try to, so we were able to do this, but now I'm going to say like print df dot.
So let's first print clinic north, because we never printed that out to actually like show that it exists and look at that column on its own.
Oh, that's a good point.
But then, yeah, I love this idea of trying to add this space.
Oh, yeah. And also, sorry, the second part of this exercise also has you print the type of object that this is, which I think is also very valuable. Because then we see, so.
Ooh, good question from Corey in the chat. I see that one. We'll touch on that as well.
So here's the north column that we pulled out, and then you'll see that that this is now saved as a pandas series, and the whole data frame is, if we do like print type df, that's going to tell us that our data frame is a data frame, but now that we've pulled out a single column, it's become something called a series. So we noticed that when we pulled out the column, the type of data changed, which is relevant to know. What was the question?
And that's relevant because it's like the things that you can do with those different data types are different. So like obviously a data frame, it understands what this bracket notation is, where if you say the data frame name and then with a bracket, it's going to try to grab that column. If you try to do that with a series, I think it will just error. I don't know what the expected behavior for that is, but basically there are different things that you can do with series, different things that you can do with data frames. This is something that I was chatting with John in the chat about, where you can kind of think of a series as a vector. Sophie, that's where your like vector addition stuff is going to come into play. Yeah, John just said that. Yeah, you can think of a series as a vector and a data frame as a matrix. That's exactly right.
Totally. And I saw there was this question about the double brackets versus single brackets. And I actually think that that changes the type. So I think if I put the double brackets and then we print here, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this to make ourselves a little more space. I think that what happens if I run this, so now notice that the type of clinic_north is a data frame.
Interesting, even though it's still only one column, it looks like.
I just read this because I was looking this up the other day as I was going through this exercise. But yeah, so the double brackets keeps it as a data frame versus the single brackets turns it into a series. And
so this is relevant. At this point, we only have 8 minutes left. So I think we should like kind of abandon the rest of the lesson and just like continue talking about the points here.
All right. Anything else you want to say about this?
Yeah, so this is relevant because
I can't hear you, Alex.
Oh no. Shoot. I'll leave and come back.
Okay. All right. I'll keep moving. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next exercise and we'll start selecting now multiple columns. So in the last one, we only got one column at a time. Now we're going to pull multiple columns out of our data frame. And this kind of goes back to this double brackets versus single brackets situation. So basically, if you're going to take multiple columns out of a data frame, then we're going to have to pass a list of the column names in order to extract those. And just in the same way that we were talking about how the single column became a series, it was really because, and I know maybe not everyone is familiar with the word vector, but a vector you can think of as like a single string of values. And so when we pulled out one column, we just had one string of values, versus if we're taking multiple columns, then we can't really have that turn into a series anyway. Are you back, Alex?
Yeah, Sophie, can you hear me?
Oh, I can't hear you.
I think it's on your end.
Is that my problem or yours?
Mm-hmm. See, people in chat were saying that they could hear me before, so maybe
I'm
Sophie
sorry, guys. Am I muted?
No.
Huh. You can hear both of us.
We only have like 5 minutes left, and so I'm going to let Sophie just like close out the show. And
my mom is also texting me to let me know that she can
hear me.
Okay. I guess I will. I don't know.
Sorry, everyone.
Oh, that worked.
Oh, hey.
Now, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe your headphones died.
Have died. Okay.
I was saying we're basically out of time. So I wanted to plug all of the events that we have going on in the future. I also want to thank everyone in chat. This was a really awesome chat today. John David Roca, you asked great questions. Courts, this is the first time I recognized your name in here, so thank you for joining. Lisa, as always, you're awesome for checking these out. Corey, nice to see you. I think I've seen you before, Corey. So thank you all for coming. I really, really appreciate it. Honestly, it's like, these are the, like, Sophie and I love doing these things and chatting with you folks. And we were always hoping to get more and more people watching. So I am very appreciative for all of you that, you know, hang out with us for an hour. I wanted to plug the thing that we have on Thursday. So if we, let's see. So the thing that we have on Thursday, if you're a pro member and go to the events page, you should see an event on Thursday that Sophie and I are going to be hosting. It isn't streamed to YouTube. It's just a Zoom call that you register for, and then you basically can get on the call with us and talk through this stuff. So that's when we'll have more time to do kind of deeper dives into all of this stuff. John, if you could make it, I would love to talk like more matrix math stuff with you. I think a potential plan for the day might be to tie all of this to data visualization in some way, where like this entire session really has had nothing to do with data visualization. So taking a little bit of time to tie these data frames to a data visualization. So yeah, so if you go to the events page, which is that, and you're a pro member, you should see an event for Thursday, the 23rd, which Sophie and I will be running.
Yep.
Cool.
It's right here.
Sophie, I'm sorry. I feel like I just took over.
No,
yeah.
that was great. I'm sorry that my technology was not fully on my side or either of our sides right now. But this was really, really fun. Like Alex said, this is like one of the highlights of my week. I love getting to talk to all of you, and it's awesome that people were engaging with us and asking questions in the chat. That always is a lot of fun. And I definitely learned some things myself in this, and I have some things to look into as well. So I'm really excited, and I hope people show up on Thursday to keep talking about this, because it's always more fun if people have more questions and there's more to be learned. So
yeah, John David, you asked, will the call be saved for viewing offline? I'm going to be out of town, but maybe I can join Zoom remotely on my cell phone. I can try to set it up so it's recorded after the fact. In fact, I'll do that. I don't know exactly how that works. I haven't like dove that deep into the Zoom stuff yet, but I can try to set that up. And then as always, you know, feel free to reach out to us. I always post my email on this stuff. I'm a Kuntz at Codecademy.com. Yeah, again, feel free to shoot me an email about any of this stuff. If you have feedback, we'd love to hear it. If you would like other things for us to be doing on these sessions, I would love to hear it. So yeah, love to, it's fun building these kind of shows with you all.
yeah, and feel free to email me as well. Mine is Sophie at Codecademy.com.
Yeah, cool.
Great. All
Awesome.
right, I will stop the share, and I don't know how do I turn it off?
Yeah, if you just, let me find